The Pro Show is brought to you by Rockin' Media and our proprietary Flash HDR photo process, providing you with the best, most realistic photos of your property. See the difference at rockinmedia.com. Welcome to the Pro Show. Hi, I'm Rick Mackley, and boy, do we have a great show for you today. We're talking about pricing, how to price your home, all the things that go into that. Then we're talking about what can cause a sale to fall out. And finally, we have some great properties to show you today. That's next on the Pro Show. So today we have amazing Coldwell Banker agents up and down the Front Range, from Fort Collins all the way down to Colorado Springs. We have Carrie Holmes in Fort Collins area, and Debbie Jacobs in the Tech Center area, Denver area. We have Jessica Drummond, and if you want to say hi a little bit, Jessica, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, I'm a local real estate agent here in the South Denver area, mostly serving Parker, Castle Rock, Franktown, Elizabeth, and Southeast Aurora. And I've been an agent in the Denver area for 13 years now.
Well, welcome to the show. And then we have Lori Delaney. She's from the North Metro area. And hi, Lori.
Yeah.
And down in Colorado Springs, we have Camelia Corey from the CC Signature Group. Well, welcome. It's going to be a fun show. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in the market. So let's start with that. So, Carrie, what are you seeing up north?
Well, I think after the Labor Day weekend, we're kind of starting to see some tick up of the fall selling season. So I've definitely seen that end of summer slowdown move on. And so we're definitely having that phone ring. Lots of sellers are testing the waters, thinking about getting into the market. So I think we're off to a great fall selling season.
And Lori, how about North Metro?
I think while the weekend was a little slower and everyone was on holiday, right away yesterday I got some calls from my buyers, and everyone wants to get out there and find the right home.
Camelia, what are you seeing? Sounds like a lot of listings are coming up, huh?
Yes, I would say over the weekend, last week, over the weekend, yesterday, I think we have 10 new home sellers that are ready to get their homes on the market. We're seeing a rise in the inventory. And along with that, obviously, we are seeing the buyers scheduling and wanting to start looking at property. So I would definitely agree with Carrie. I think the slow summer is behind us and the pickup for the fall season is here.
Debbie Jacobs, how about you?
I would agree. I have quite a few listings that will be coming up here in the fall, and I agree that sellers are starting to settle in. Kids are back to school, and they can really see that there's enough inventory for them to be able to find a replacement home.
Well, that's great. And Jessica, why don't you give us kind of an in-depth as to what you're seeing there in the southeast part of the market, since we haven't really covered that before?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm seeing is that, I think everybody's back and settling in as it was mentioned. And the focus is now on an anticipation of rates starting to come down, which is definitely pulling some buyers that have been waiting. And with a bit of rise in inventory, there's homes that have been sitting on the market are starting to go under contract. And I definitely am seeing a lot of excitement coming back into the market here in this segment of Southeast, in the Parker area and all of that.
Well, that's great. It sounds like if I'm looking to buy a home, this is a good time to start shopping because you have some inventory to actually look at now. Is that correct? Would you agree?
Definitely, the buyers have a great amount of homes to choose from, and there's some over asking price offers and some multiple offers, but lots of opportunity for buyers right now.
This week, we're going to get a little bit smarter about mortgages by talking with Nancy Alexander about debt-to-income ratios. We talked a little bit about it last week. This week, we want to really talk about what are the numbers that go into that? Car payments, things like that. And how does it work? Hi,
So
Nancy.
your DTI, Rick, it's a great question. You and I talk about it all the time. That DTI is the equation that says, yes, you qualify or no, you don't. And it's nothing more than a long division equation. So just take your pen, write the horizontal line across the piece of paper, and in turn start putting on the top of the line your revolving pieces of debt. So what is your car payment, right? If it's $465 a month, and that's what it says on the credit report, that's what we use. Credit card, $23 a month, right? Student loan, $140 a month. So these are plus, plus, plus. And then it's plus your proposed housing payment. And that's where it catches a lot of people, is because they don't know what that payment's going to be. They haven't done that calculation yet. So use your payment that you don't want to exceed. Let's call that $3,000 a month. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you've got your car payment at $465, you got your little credit card payment, you got your student loan, and now you've got plus your proposed housing payment.
Okay.
Divided by monthly gross income. Remember, you and I, Rick, were talking about gross versus net. Why do we use gross, etc.? But it is monthly gross income. So you got to know what that number is. One divided by the other is going to give you a number. That number we deem as the debt to income ratio. We look at it as a percentage. That percentage can't exceed 50%, 50.
Okay.
Jumbo money can't exceed 43%. FHA, if you've got good credit scores, you can take it to about a 54%.
Okay.
And VA, you can run it up to about a 65% if everything aligns.
So what if I got my eye on this car. I know I'm supposed to close on my loan next week, but I can't pass it up. And it's, are you looking at that I just added a whole bunch more debt, or that by now my car payment's going to be in that debt to income ratio, and it could potentially push me over that 50% in your example?
It could. What we always say is don't buy anything when you start the mortgage process.
Okay.
Don't buy the car, even though you want that Jag. Don't go buy the washer and dryer. Don't go buy anything for that matter. It's not that you have to pay things off that you have. It's that ratio is calculated on what is present.
Okay.
Right? So we want to keep the present constant.
And on my credit cards, are you just counting the minimum payment due?
Good question. Yes, minimum payment due. So if you pay more, don't put that on the top of your line. Put what that minimum payment due is.
Okay, so let's just say if I owe 20 grand on you don't care that I owe 20 grand on my credit cards. You just care that my minimum payment's $134 a month or whatever it is.
Exactly.
And
Exactly right.
Even if that means I'm paying off my credit cards until I die. But at least, but from your purpose, you don't care. You just want to know all the debts that are adding up that I have to make every month, including what eventually would be my new mortgage payment based on interest rates and HOAs and things like that.
Correct. So remember, if you're trying to buy non-contingent, right, you're trying to hold on to the current residence you've got right now, and you want to buy the new residence, and you want to close on the new residence before you move out of the old, right? Now we're counting the current mortgage.
Wow.
And the proposed housing payment.
That could definitely throw off your ratios unless you have a very small mortgage. So, well, I think that's great information. And if you'd like to talk to Nancy a little bit more, feel free to give her a call here on the number on the screen, and she'll talk to you and help you figure out what your ratios are. And I appreciate your time today. Thanks, Nancy. So today we're going to talk, as well as on many different episodes, about how to price your home. So I'm going to be the hypothetical seller and homeowner that's looking to figure out how you price a home, or how I price a home. So first of all, who sets the price? Do I set the price, or do you set the price? Who wants to take that one?
So it's really a collaborative effort, because the real estate agent that you choose is going to be able to understand what's going on in the market. And if they are an active real estate agent, they really know and can give you very good details about what's happening in your particular neighborhood. So the guidance from the real estate agent is really very important. However, at the end of the day, the seller does have an overriding comments. They understand the market a little bit in their neighborhood. And of course, everybody compares their house to their neighbor's house.
So I'm the one who sets the price, or you set the price?
I think it's a collaborative effort. I think that the guidance really should come from the real estate agent, but the input from the seller is also very important.
Carrie, what are your thoughts on this topic?
Well, I think Debbie's spot on when she says it is a collaborative effort. However, ultimately, it is the seller who decides the price. Hopefully, they appreciate the reason they hire the realtor for their expertise, experience, market knowledge. We do this 24/7, 365 days a year. So it's important that they rely on our insights and the trends that we see that might not necessarily translate to past historical data, that they need to, put some weight and gravity in that. So hopefully we work together to determine that price. But ultimately, it is the seller that gets to determine the price.
So my house is selling. I want to put it up on the market. My neighbor next door to me a couple years ago sold for $500,000. Their house is smaller than mine. I don't think it had the same number of upgrades. It's probably about 10% smaller. Can I just say, well, they sold theirs for $500,000. Lori, why wouldn't I want to just put mine at $550,000?
We're in an entirely different market now than we were 2 years ago. We're even in a different market now than we were a month ago or a day ago. So the market, I agree totally with Debbie and Carrie. It is a collective effort, and the agent would provide a lot of information and recent comps and that kind of thing. But the challenge of the market and valuing a property is that it's constantly evolving. So, and it's not a perfect science. So you aim as close to identify, what the market value is today for that home and that property in that neighborhood. And provided the sellers aren't like saying, hey, I want to list it for $700,000, I will go with what they say, with the understanding that, hey, the biggest deciding factor is the amount of traffic, if we've hit the market value right. And if we don't receive a lot of traffic, then I get them to agree up front to reduce the price if we haven't had the traffic in, say, a couple to 3 weeks, or depending on what the days on market is for that neighborhood.
Camelia, Lori mentioned comps. What does that mean? It sounds like it's a kind of a real estate jargon.
Right. Well, comps would be the comparables in the neighborhood of actives, under contracts, pending, or sold homes. And so when we determine the value of a home, really everybody has said all the right answers, and the market helps us determine the value of a home, because we're, what's the state of the economy? What are the interest rates doing? What's the competition in the neighborhood? If you have a buyer coming to, banana neighborhood, they have 3 houses to look at. How does yours compare with the other 2 that are on the market? And so understanding your competition or the comps in the neighborhood is a huge factor in determining value.
And Jessica, what goes into comps? I mean, is it just size, or what is it?
No, it is not just size. There are many factors going into, comparing 2 homes together to each other. It could be, it's square footage, finishes, basement, is the basement finished versus not finished, bedroom count, bathroom count, of course, all of that, and any upgrade is factors as well. But I think that it's also interesting, you can have 2 homes literally next to each other. One could sell in this market, sometimes 30,000 more than the next door neighbor. And, and a comp could be looked at as, well, why did that happen? And I've personally seen some interesting situations where home sellers are having to sell for job transfers or job changes. And that motivating factor is also something to consider if you're looking at how to price two very similar homes. So I do think that sellers have to consider that, and that's where their ultimate pricing decision can come into play as well.
So average home price in the area doesn't mean anything, right, Debbie?
Well, and to Jessica's point, if you have someone that needs to sell, as an example, the seller is already under contract with a new construction home, or they need to move out of state for, some type of a relocation, that pricing model for that seller and the goals that that seller has are significantly different than someone that doesn't really know where they want to go. And if I can sell this month, that's great. But if it doesn't sell and I want to just wait till the end of the year, that's also a real huge factor on what that seller might want to have for their goals. And that's where your real estate agents are really going to come in to figure out, okay, let's do some power pricing. Let's get a lot of people in the house. Let's get this sold quickly. Or, conversely, they may choose to be a little higher, which of course I'm sure everyone on the podcast today will agree that is not a good strategy for a seller.
Camelia?
I like the word strategy when it comes to pricing, because pricing, it has its own strategy. There's 5 pillars of strategy when you're listing a home, but pricing is one. And earlier we talked about the pricing. The seller's really in charge of where the pricing hits the market, right? With the guidance of their agent. But the strategy around it, I think, these agents were hitting on what that means for a seller strategy, what that means for a seller with what their individual needs are, how quickly does it need to sell, what kind of upgrades are in the home, and having that in-depth conversation with the seller and building out the strategy so that they have an end goal that we're trying to reach. It's not just the neighbor's house sold for this, so we're going to price it. No. Let's talk about the whole picture. Everything that comes together with pricing has to be looked at, evaluated, and then that final number determined. So I think from a seller's perspective, they think it's just one element of pricing, what my neighbor's home sold for. But I love the conversation around the strategy. We're pulling in all kinds of different perspectives, and timing is one of them. Prepping the home, what all needs to be done on the home. Are you willing to replace the carpet? Is the house been completely remodeled? Are we staging it? Are we going to make it very appealing to the buyer so that they're just falling all over themselves wanting the home? Interest rates that are out there, can buyers afford this home at the price we want to list it at? Do we need to offer concessions? So I think it's a big package, and I think the word strategy, if sellers could understand the word strategy when it comes to pricing, I think that would help them moving forward down this path.
I'd also like to jump in really quick.
Carrie.
Your scenario, I think it's really important for sellers to understand it's not just about a neighborhood, it's about a market. So when your seller says, oh, well, my neighbor sold for this, yes, that's true and accurate, but also I need to communicate with my sellers. We need to think about what this buyer is buying. I have a $700,000 budget, and I'm not just looking in your neighborhood. I'm taking my $700,000 budget and I'm looking here in Northern Colorado, not just in Fort Collins. I might be looking in Windsor, Loveland, etc. So we need to look at the broader market as well. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the seller's perspective.
That's a good point. And obviously in my scenario, I might be selling in October and my neighbor sold in May. I assume that has something to do with it, right, Jessica?
Absolutely. Timing is everything, as they say. And I think timing has changed too, though, with how the market is looking at. I mean, sometimes as professionals, we see, we're kind of accustomed to certain times of year being busier or higher, selling times than at others. And now I think that is kind of falling to the wayside, the norm. So we're seeing a huge uptick right now. And I think that's based on a lot of factors external to just typical home buyers and sellers ready to move forward. But a lot of factors there.
Lori?
I think the strategy for most sellers is to err on the side of probably pricing too high, wanting to maximize their return on investment, when in fact, really, it's counterintuitive. You should, if you're going to err on the side of pricing it too low, and then you have a higher probability of a multiple offer situation coming along. The other thing I think that people tend to forget is that the average, while there's aggravators out there like Zillow, the average buyer, almost all buyers will turn to Zillow. And so I always check Zillow just to see I think even though it's determined by algorithms, it is a good indication of the trending in the market. So I always show that to my seller so I can say, hey, we're going into September, so things might be trending down versus up. And so, yes, definitely the timing of the market when your home hits the market is consideration. And then the other piece is a lot of these sellers think that if they've put $150,000 worth of upgrades into their home, they want to price accordingly, when in fact the amount that you've invested in upgrades has nothing to do with its market value. So I try to point that out, and we need to meet the market, not chase the market.
Debbie, tell me about Zestimate. Everybody knows about Zillow's Zestimate. How accurate do you typically find it to be?
I do not find it very accurate. Well, let me back up. If it is a neighborhood in which there are multiple properties that are the same model, okay, so this is a production style builder neighborhood where the neighborhood has been built out for a number of years and there isn't any new inventory in that neighborhood, I think that Zillow probably has some value because it does show like for like. But if you are looking in a pocket neighborhood, meaning that there are custom homes that are located with, sometimes even within that general area, Zillow has really, could be all over the board. It could be $100,000 off. So I think that it really does come down to, is this just a standard builder grade type of community, or is this a pocket, as to whether or not I would rely on it?
One of the things I've noticed too, and I've seen this on a number of other videos online, is that let's just say I say, no, I want to have my house listed at $700,000. All of a sudden, the Zestimate thinks you've decided this house is worth $700,000. Now my Zestimate is $695. They won't go quite to $700, but that's shown happen a lot. And so the Zestimate is kind of playing off of some of your knowledge, I think, in some ways, but that's kind of a post-factor thing. And it doesn't mean that it'll necessarily sell that because you told me to sell at $550, and I'm saying it should go at $700. And so Zestimate must go, well, Carrie knows something because she told me that she's their agent and she's going to say it's $700, not necessarily. So have to be cautious about that from everything I've seen. So I've decided I want to put it on the market. Who thinks you should start high and chase it down, and how high if you do? Anybody? Or do you just think you price it and then let the market? And obviously in this day and age, it must be difficult because prices are going up, interest rates are going down. What is a comp? All that. So that probably plays into a factor as well. So what else goes into pricing? Anybody have any other thoughts that I need to take into consideration?
Things on pricing, it's not always, you're looking at comps and comparable homes in the neighborhood, but things that are outside of the home itself would be the location. Are you backing to the green belt of the neighborhood? Do you have that beautiful mountain view? Was the home, were there custom features? done to the home when it was built. Like, for instance, some of these neighborhoods have older homes that are getting renovated and remodeled. So you have an older home versus one that's, been remodeled, and maybe they've opened up, taken down walls, opened it up, changed the floor plan to really appeal to today's audience. So I think, some of those things are factors, I think, in pricing as well.
Debbie?
So when I price a home, or assist a seller to price a home, what I'd like to do is I like to run all of the past sales, and then I really focus in on price per square foot above grade. And the reason I do that is because, we might have a professionally built out basement, or we might have an unfinished basement. And to really get a great price per square foot and to understand where you're at in the market, if you exclude the basement and start looking at price per square foot above grade, I think that has been very successful for me in the past to really be able to drill down in that. And then, the other piece to that is that you should have like to like properties that you're comparing. A single story ranch style home, price per square foot above grade is always significantly higher, even within the same neighborhood as a 2-story, as an example.
Jessica, what, there might be 5 neighbors of my neighbors that are up for sale. Does what they're pricing their house mean anything today?
Absolutely. So, you can have 5 similar homes all on the same, portion of the neighborhood. And if one is going to be professionally staged, shows amazing, has, everything just move-in ready, I think that one, is easy to price higher than the others that aren't. And those are definite considerations when talking about pricing with sellers and a seller deciding, what are they willing to do to the property to, appeal to the buyers to get that higher price.
But Carrie, are you taking into consideration how long those others have been on the market at those prices, or is that even considered?
Well, I think Jessica makes a great point. Buyers want move-in ready. So if the carpet and flooring have been updated, if the fixtures have been updated, they're willing to pay a premium for that. So I think that's a big factor. And per Camilla's point, it's, do we have a small budget maybe that we can do some of those improvements? And then if we do we have the time to do these things? Because it might be one of those things where, yes, we can do them, we can increase the price, but does it make sense if we're putting the home on the market 2 weeks before Christmas or in that winter doldrums there? So I think there's so many variables, and it just reiterates, all the agents here have this breadth and background of knowledge. It just reiterates the importance of hiring a realtor and working with somebody who knows and can calculate all these variables on your behalf.
And it sounds like that's obviously key. And because it's too much for me, just a person who's got a real job, to figure all this stuff out. And so one of the things I've often heard is that you guys have your ear to as I think it was Carrie saying, you're doing this all the time. Maybe it was Laura, I can't remember. And what that means is that now you've got a situation where you're hearing that interest rates are going to go up. And I have not heard that at all. And that could affect how long it's going to take you to sell. My recommendation, this is just me, listen to these ladies, because when they say you need to lower the price, do it. Don't go, well, let's wait a few more weeks, because that may mean that we now have a 0.5 point interest rate hike, and now it made it even harder for you to lower it. Anybody have any thoughts on that, Lori?
Piggyback off of what Camilla said, as far as there's features and updates and different things to consider when pricing home. But likewise, if there is something like it backs to a road or has like a negative feature, then I always tell my sellers, if you can't change it, you have to account for that in price. And then I always will watch the days on the market, because I always pull that also in addition to the comparables and the information as far as, pricing, because you don't want to be one of those homes that accumulates too high of days on the market for that particular area, because then, there's those that are priced right and they go, it's a little slower this year than it has been in years past, but still they go on and come off and they go on and come off. And if yours is sitting, it's a usually prime indication that we've priced it a little too high for what it offers for that neighborhood in the market of today.
And I would say that has to do as much with the fact that everyone that's on this program markets their properties really well. They do everything they can to market it. And so it's one of those things where people will want to do everything. Homeowners, I hear from these ladies and others all the time, homeowners will want to attribute it to anything but it's priced too high. And whereas, oh, well, we didn't get that one picture because I'm a photographer of X, and that's why it didn't sell yet. And then I might talk to Jessica, and she goes, yeah, it's about 50K over what it really should be at. And it's, but we'll take that picture because it makes the homeowner happy, but that may not necessarily get it sold. If Jessica's saying lower the price, I would recommend you listen to her. And so, that's important because, they have their ear to the ground, and that's really what's important. And you're seeing a lot more homes, I assume, too. So even though the comps or the homes you're seeing may not be in the same neighborhood, you're hearing a lot of the same stuff, I'm sure, from different neighbors. Yes?
Rick, I think it's important that the sellers also listen to the agent feedback. So after we have showings on the property, we realtors follow up and we get some feedback from the other agents that have shown with their buyer. So they're looking at similar properties. They've got that budget. They're very active in that price point. And if we're continually getting feedback that maybe it's overpriced or there's something that we can fix with the property that's continually coming up, we may want to look at doing some of those things. So you're not just hearing it from your listing agent, you're hearing it from the broader realtor community. So I think that helps sellers understand that this is a legitimate request and concern.
If you're consistently getting a negative comment about the driveway, or perhaps the front step is offset or something, it's really a good idea to get an estimate on what that would cost to repair that particular negative item of the property, because that the buyer is thinking, okay, I'm going to have to fix the driveway and that's going to be $15,000, when really that might only be a $6,000 repair. And by having that knowledge in your back pocket, that's really going to help you to figure out pricing, or maybe you offer that as a concession. Maybe you go back to the buyers that have expressed that as a negative about that particular property and say, what if we were to repair that driveway? Would that change your buyer's mind about that particular property? Right now, with our inventory the way that it is and being more of a balanced market, a good real estate agent is going to go that extra mile to be able to communicate to these other agents what will bring that buyer to that property.
Jessica, anything else you want to add?
Well, yes, absolutely. The other thing I always think as realtors in the field, as it was mentioned, when we take buyers out to look at properties, and we find what our buyers' feedback is touring other properties, we can bring that information to our sellers just kind of in a general sense. Here's what buyers are looking for right now. Here's what buyers are saying about, X, Y, and Z in a home. And I think even just that kind of, groundwork knowledge that we have to bring to the sellers really can help fine tune what needs to happen in that property to get it sold at the right price.
Camelia?
Yes, I think the biggest problem with mispricing a home that I'm seeing right now in the market with sellers is that they have in their mind a certain price that they need to walk away with. instead of saying, I'm putting my wares out to the market, who's going to give me what price? They just have a predetermined price that they need to walk away with. And that's very difficult to get out of a seller's head when the market isn't agreeing with that net number back. And so I think the mental work that a seller has to go through with being detached from how much you're going to walk away with and really coming to terms with what is the market willing to give me for my home today. A lot of the sellers that I'm working with right now in the market remember 2020, 2021, when the market was a little bit crazy and homes were selling really for prices well above the actual market value then. I mean, they just shot up quite a bit. And so I think it's a mental game a little bit, trying to get sellers to get that out of their head. As soon as somebody tells me I need to walk away with X amount of dollars, I know I've got some homework to do to help them understand that just because they want to walk away with 700,000 doesn't mean the market is at that place. And so, yeah, these agents, amazing agents, have really set forth some good ideas, great expectations. And I just think right now, if there's a seller watching this and they have that idea in their head, I think just coming to terms with that will open up the doors to be able to accept all these other options to get their home sold in the time that they need.
It's another problem with the Zestimate, the Zillow estimate. People get that number in their head, and they remember the one from 2020 or 2021, and it may not be the same now because the market shifted. It may actually be higher in some places, depending on which area you represent. Boulder seems to always go up. It doesn't matter, and other areas around different neighborhoods even will see their prices increase because of that. But it's not, I think Laverne Brookie on a different show said what you need to take, like Amelia was saying, what you need to get to buy your next home really has very little to do with what you're going to get from your home.
Doing a seller's net sheet during the initial strategy planning will also be very helpful because there are costs that you would expect as a seller to be paying, including, title insurance or some other areas, HOA potentially. And so providing a seller's net sheet, I think, is also a very good strategy piece for what you should be listing the property for to really understand those final costs.
Well, it's been a great discussion. I'm sure we'll have many more in the weeks ahead as the market continues to change and giving people additional strategies about how to price their home. So Greg is joining us from Real Property Management. Hi, Greg.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm doing great. And you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome. So today we're talking about whether we should rent a property that's furnished or unfurnished. And I know there's a lot of questions about that. How would you talk about that? How would you decide or help me decide which way I want to go?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a lot of factors that actually go into that. So here's what we're going to talk about first, the COVID dynamic, that favorite word that we've all been talking about now since 2020. So here was the status of where that furnished rental market was pre-COVID. So pre-COVID, companies were transferring a lot of people. Companies were moving project managers around, having a GM come into Denver, for instance, for 6 months to turn around a distressed division or something like that. And so a GM doesn't want to necessarily stay in a hotel for 6 months. And so a furnished rental made a ton of sense pre-COVID. Interestingly enough, though, what's transpired during COVID was that market took an incredible hit. Companies don't move people around as much anymore. We conduct a lot more business via Zoom and Teams and WebEx and you name it, those other types of online platforms. And so because companies are not moving people around as anymore, we have seen the demand really drop off for the furnished rental. Even during COVID, we had lots of traveling nurses going all over America trying to fill gaps here and there. They needed a furnished place to live when they came to Denver or anywhere else. So the furnished rental piece was very popular pre-COVID. Post-COVID, when people are doing Teams and Zoom and WebEx and that kind of stuff, there just isn't the demand. And so interestingly enough, as a company, we actually don't even offer the option for furnished rentals anymore because there's so little demand. We just don't want to disappoint our clients who are looking for a good long-term solution, and the furnished rental really is not a good long-term solution anymore. Now, the unfurnished rental, still ample demand out there. There are people looking to rent like crazy with interest rates remaining at higher than they have historically been over the past couple of years. It is still keeping some folks in the rental game versus moving into the buy world.
And obviously, a downside to having a furnished is who was in there last. And,
Absolutely.
And I can imagine in Colorado, given that we get to partake in some drugs, that can soil. And as a landlord, now you've got furniture that you can't use, and nobody wants to rent your place anymore because it smells like marijuana. So
that is correct.
Or cigarette smoke. And all it takes is one tenant who, even on a short term or a long term, who decides not to play by your rules, and now you're stuck with stinky furniture. So it's probably a lot easier to clean carpet on an unfurnished and let them bring their own furniture.
Absolutely. Carpet and paint go a long way. When you go get a good carpet cleaner in there, add a fresh coat of paint to the walls, that's a different ball game than trying to take care of all the couches and everything else that may have gotten a smell that you can't get rid of.
Well, if you want to learn more about furnished, unfurnished apartments, or just rental information in general, feel free to reach out to Greg and his team, and I'm sure he'd love to talk to you. And I appreciate your time again today. Showing your property at its best online is one of the first of many important steps to getting your home sold. At Rockin' Media, we provide you with the best quality photos taken by staff photographers, not contractors, who process your photos individually. We use our proprietary Flash HDR process, which combines the natural look of HDR with the color accuracy of Flash, along with properly exposed windows. Rockin' Media's HDR process is clearly exceptional. Find out more and schedule online at rockinmedia.com. So you've just got your contract. You're really excited because now you think you're going to get to close, but there are a number of things that can come up. And we're going to talk at a high level today about some of those items. And Carrie, what is one of the items that can cause the contract to not get to closing?
I think one of the overlooked contingencies of the contract is probably the HOA documents review. So if you are in a community that does have an HOA, we have a common interest community review process. So the seller is obligated to provide all the HOA documents, meeting minutes, budgets, financials. All of this needs to be provided to the buyer by a certain date and deadline in the contract. The buyer then has the right to review that. And if there's anything that's unsatisfactory, they can terminate, get their earnest money back, and move on to a different contract. For example, and it can be in the buyer's sole subjective discretion, something that's not satisfactory to them. So for example, let's just say they want to paint their house pink and the HOA doesn't allow them to do that. That's an example how a buyer can terminate. But also on even a larger scale, let's just say there's not sufficient funds in the budget for repair items moving forward. That would be a red flag for a buyer. So they might determine that this isn't the right property for them. I always, always, always recommend that my clients read the meeting minutes. The meeting minutes are where something might not be of record as of yet, but they might be making a decision for a special assessment or some larger scale investment that's coming down the road. So it's important to look at those in detail. And again, that's one of these contingencies we have to protect the home buyers in the process.
And we had an in-depth discussion about HOAs a couple of weeks ago, the pros and cons of that. So if you're interested, you can either listen to that podcast or see it on this channel as well. Jessica, what's another breaker point?
Oh, another breaker point is that inspection objection. And that is when the buyers will come with their objection list from their home inspection and bring any request of the seller to, make any items corrected from the inspection findings.
Camelia?
Well, I think another overlooked contingency item in the contract would be insurance. It's assumed that every home can just get insurance. You can call up your insurance company and say, I'm buying a house. I need to get insurance on it. A lot of times sellers don't do that buyers don't do that until the very end, right before closing. There is a deadline in the contract specifically for your insurance. And what we're finding out is that the condos, townhomes, homes that are luxury homes that are in the trees in certain zones, insurance companies are not insuring every property these days. So in that window of time that you have to get your insurance, what we are coaching all of our buyers now is the day after you are under contract, start calling your insurance company or companies to make sure that the home that you're wanting to insure is insurable to the price and standards that you would like. So are they requiring flood insurance? Are they requiring fire insurance? Are they exempting that home because it's in a specific zone? It can take sometimes up to a week to 10 days to actually find an insurance company to insure certain properties.
And if I'm getting that insurance, but I can get it, but I can't afford it, is that also a way that I can get out if I go, dang, I didn't realize it was going to be that expensive?
Absolutely. That's what that deadline is there to protect the buyers. If that insurance is so crazy, ridiculously expensive, you absolutely can terminate based on that. And we have had contracts terminate based on insurance alone. So super important to pay attention to that. Something that buyers need to know about the whole buying process is the purchase contract is really written to protect the buyer so that they're not buying a home that they can, after closing, turn around and regret. And a lot of times buyers don't understand the time commitment that is required to make sure that you're doing all of your due diligence. So your agent, your good agent, is going to walk you through what each of those deadlines are for. They're going to keep you on track with a calendar of dates and deadlines as to when you need to have those deadlines met, reviews done. So one good advice to buyers is set aside time to work on the purchase of your home, to do your due diligence. A lot of times they're like, oh, found a house, signed a contract, get my loan, buy it. And they don't do their due diligence. So your good buyer agent is going to help you do that. So don't forget these contingencies that are there to protect you.
Lori, what about financing? Does that come into play? And if so, how?
It's not a cash situation, and I would say a large percentage of the time the buyers are getting a loan and they have to go through the qualification process. I think many times if the buyer agent doesn't really educate them, they think, okay, I got pre-qualification, and they don't realize what's ahead for them. And there's just a lot of documentation required to get to the lender, and that can take a while. I also think one of the most critical contingencies is the inspection resolution. I always tell my sellers that after we get past inspection resolution, we're like 80% of the way there. So that's a very, very critical contingency to have an agent navigate and help you through to where both buyers and sellers come to terms on all of those myriads of issues that can involve so many different things: roof, radon, HVAC are some of the large ones, and then there's everything in between.
Debbie, what are your thoughts?
Another contingency point in the contract is the appraisal deadline. So the appraisal, if you are getting a loan, if the buyer is getting a loan, typically that lender will ask for an appraisal, and the appraisal deadline allows the buyer to understand what is the appraised value of that property. If the appraised value comes in lower, then you would have the opportunity as a buyer to contact the seller through your agent and do an objection on the appraisal, saying, we're $20,000 lower on the appraised value than what we are under contract. And then there would be a negotiation period where the buyer would go back to the seller and say, we would like to still buy the home, but we're not going to be able to get a loan based on this appraisal. So you either need to lower the price or we need to cancel the contract. And then, of course, the seller would go back on the market. But that appraisal is sticky for about 6 months. So it would keep coming back up. And that would be something that the seller really needs to understand what that timeline would look like. And even a new buyer would have to would have that appraisal information in their hands because that 6-month period had not expired.
And I guess that underneath a lot of this is, keeping your employment status as a buyer, that you may sign the contract and 3 months later you might have lost your job. In fact, I think I heard from an agent recently that they got to the closing table and they did a verification of employment and they had lost their job and hadn't told anybody and gotten to that point. So be open about those things. You're not going to get away with it, and you don't want to anyway because you just bought a house and you don't have a job. So, it's not great for the seller because now they're starting over and they thought they were at the finish line. But keep that in mind. Anybody ever have that happen to them where they didn't have it happens quite a bit. Any other circuit breakers that come up to play? And then maybe next week we can talk about it. Carrie, you had one?
Well, we can't forget about the survey contingency. I know that's a little less glamorous, but it not only applies on properties with acreage, but also in subdivisions. So this contingency, again, is not only there to protect you should you want a survey on the property, but sometimes it's a requirement. So the title company can require it, your lender can require it. So that's one that you want to make sure that there's sufficient time to get accomplished because they are not as quick as maybe a home inspector. It really protects you. Maybe the neighbor's fence is on your property and there's some sort of easement issues. So it's really important, especially on acreage, but also it does come up in subdivisions where you wouldn't think, this fence has been here for 30 years. There can't be an issue. Well, sometimes they do sneak in there. So again, we can't forget that deadline as a contingency, a protection for the buyer through the process.
And if that would just be one of those things you could object to or have to negotiate. And is that something the seller does right away, or is that something that happens once you go under contract, Carrie?
Well, it would be once you go under a contract. A lot of times the seller doesn't even know maybe that they didn't have a survey done on the property. They might not be aware that there's an issue. And then it boils down to being a conversation. Now, if it's a requirement from title or lender, it will have to get resolved prior to closing. However, if it's something you've chosen to do on your own as part of your due diligence, it might not necessarily have to be completed, but you're definitely going to want to have that conversation with the seller. And likely there's going to need to be some sort of compensation that's going to have to happen with moving a fence, moving a shed, something along those lines. And it's also part of a discussion with a neighbor as well. So it's a lot easier with a seller who's lived there for years and years to have that conversation with a neighbor on that, maybe that encroachment issue as well. So a lot of discussion goes into that contingency.
Well, that's awesome. I know there are probably more of these, and for today, I think that gives us a good start, and maybe we'll drill down deep into each one of them in future episodes, especially that one about inspections. I have a feeling that's a big discussion on its own. So look forward to that in future episodes. Jessica, tell us about this property.
Oh, this is a fantastic patio style home in the Saddle Rock Golf Club, very close to the Saddle Rock Golf Course Clubhouse, so within walking distance. This home has been updated in areas, beautiful bright white kitchen, has some finished basement, fully finished with 3 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, full bathrooms. Ample space. This has got over 2,700 square feet finished and has low maintenance living. You basically don't even have to change a light bulb outside if you don't want to. It's just a beautiful property and has been well maintained.
Well, if you want to see this property, I'm sure Jessica would love to show it to you. Give her a call, and appreciate you bringing this to us today, Jessica.
I'm excited to show you this beautiful home that sits on the northwest side of Colorado Springs. It's a rare combination of privacy with great mountain views. This home is well appointed with attention to detail throughout, including this custom driveway and garage doors. Hi, I'm Camelia with the CC Signage Group at Coldwell Banker. Come on in. I can't wait to show you around. This home has many places to gather, including this beautiful family room. Take in the mountain views from these southern-facing windows or off this back deck. In the winter, you'll enjoy one of many fireplaces right here in the family room. Another place to take in the views is in this eat-in kitchen area. Speaking of the kitchen, you'll notice there's ample storage and stainless steel appliances. On one side of the front door is the living room with yet another gas fireplace and built-in bookcases. On the other side of the front door is the formal dining room with a barreled ceiling and a custom chandelier. And across from the front door is the study. And welcome to the main level primary suite, complete with its own private deck and electric awning. It also boasts the 3rd gas fireplace in this home. And you'll enjoy the ambiance of this updated primary bath. And you'll also find a spacious walk-in closet with built-ins. And now let's check out the rest of this home. Thank you for joining me on a tour of this beautiful home. It's even better in person. Give me a call. I'd love to show it to you.
This has been a great discussion. I'm happy that everybody was able to join us today, and they brought up a lot of great points. And if you have further questions, feel free to call them at the numbers here on the screen. And I appreciate your time, everyone. Thanks again. We'll see you next week.